I joined the Guard in March of '01. Obviously, in March of 2001, at that point, I feel like we thought the National Guard never went anywhere but in the U.S., right? But we also, there was like no sign of combat or war, and we just thought, we didn't know what was going to happen. Obviously, 6 months later, that was just going to change so many things about our country and so many families, right? For so many years to come, lifetimes to come. So, I did find myself spending a year in Iraq, all of '05, and the Lord had a big plan around that. And I couldn't see it at the time. It was a time that, I say the military taught me to have a never give up mentality. And I being in positions and places that I just never imagined, right? As you can relate to say the least. I just never imagined the places that I was going to have to go and things you have to do. And not everybody in my squad made it home. But I'm thankful.
Welcome back to the show, Disruptors. I'm your host, Aaron Hale, and this is Point of Impact. Today I've got an awesome guest for you, Whitney Sewell, who's a former law enforcement officer, National Guardsman, who started LifeBridge Capital and is dedicated to a life of wealth and giving back, making an impact in his world. And he's doing it in many ways, through educating, through helping other investors find financial freedom, dedicating to helping support adoption through the Omnah Foundation. So we're going to get to all of that in just a moment. First, Whitney, welcome to the show.
Honored to be here, Aaron. Pleasure to meet you, and looking forward to the conversation for sure.
I'll tell you what, sir, I've known of you, and I've been listening to you for quite a while, and beyond the fact that you have an incredible podcast and you're such a great educator and interviewer, your scale, is frankly, it's awe-inspiring. Well, you have somewhere around, 1,500 units of large-scale multifamily apartment syndications, totaling approximately $450 million of value. That's just in the last 5-6 years. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's just the Lord, Aaron. I mean, it is so many doors have been opened, and yes, we grew really fast the first few years. The last couple of years have been really slow, but yes, we grew really fast.
You've got this incredible scale with LifeBridge Capital over a short period. But before we get into how you accomplished this, I'd like to start before with National Guard service and law enforcement, and really that catalyst moment when you decided to shift gears and go into real estate investing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, Aaron, and it's a story I love to tell. I feel like I hope it helps others as well, because I was in a place often, or many times, I feel like I didn't know where I was going to go, what the next step was going to be, and the Lord has had a plan, to say the least, every step of the way. And so I joined the Guard in March of '01. And obviously in March of 2001, at that point, I feel like we thought the National Guard never went anywhere but in the U.S., right? But we also, there was like no sign of combat or war, and we just thought, we didn't know what was going to happen. Obviously, 6 months later, that was just going to change so many things about our country and so many families, right? For so many years to come, lifetimes to come. So, I did find myself spending a year in Iraq, all of '05. And the Lord had a big plan around that. And I couldn't see it at the time. It was a time that, I say the military taught me to have a never give up mentality. And it's, being in positions and places that I just never imagined, right? As you can relate to say the least. I just never imagined the places that I was going to have to go and things you have to do. And not everybody in my squad made it home. And so, but I'm thankful, obviously, to have been able to make it home. But when I came home, I didn't know what I was going to do. Like I love the structure and the discipline, the uniform, those things. But Law enforcement was something that I felt like, okay, I love serving. I love the structure, the discipline. It seems like a good transition. I got hired by Kentucky State Police. There's 1,200 applicants for 5 positions. I was blessed to have one of those, and I would have done it for free the first couple of years. So I really enjoyed it. But then I got married, Aaron, and I found out that it was going to be really hard to support a family on about $28,000 a year. And so that pushed me at that time to figure out, okay, what else can I do to supplement my income? I really felt like wearing the uniform was going to be a career for me. I couldn't see that there was other things that I was even, capable of doing. Like, I really just felt like this is all I know. I didn't have college. I didn't have that diploma. I didn't, like, that's just all I felt like I was capable of doing. However, so I learned about this thing called rental real estate, and I thought, well, wait a minute, if this many people have built wealth in real estate, we can do something. And so we pushed to buy 2 triplexes, and this is while I was still a police officer. And so I was policing at night, and I was managing these apartments and fixing things and re-renting units during the day. And it was a difficult time. We learned many hard lessons. Needless to say, we didn't make any money off these apartments except for the lessons learned. That's for sure. But shortly after, I learned about a position as a federal agent, and I became a federal agent. Long story short, that moved us to Virginia. We sold those units. And then while I was a federal agent, believe it or not, I took the normal path to real estate success and to learning how to scale a real estate business that probably many people that have taken. And I became a professional horse trainer. Right? That isn't that what most real estate professionals do? I'm just kidding. Just a joke. But it was just a passion of mine since I was a little boy. Was to train horses, and I loved doing that. And so I was federal agent during the day, and I was training horses at night, giving lessons. But it became more than 2 full-time jobs. And my wife and I were walking on the beach one fall, and we just said, hey, is what we're doing right now going to get us where we want to go in 5 years or even 10 years? The obvious answer was no. We came home and decided to sell the farm so we could start a commercial real estate business. We knew real estate could build wealth, and that's ultimately what we did. We sold the farm. We moved into a small house in town, rented a house, and I started a daily podcast, and which you referenced. We interviewed over 2,000 people on a daily show, and that helped us to grow and to scale quickly. But while all of that was happening, Aaron, when we moved to Virginia, ultimately the first weekend we were here, we were still newlyweds, but we heard a pastor talk about how they had adopted and really just the need for families that would adopt. And we had never been exposed to that before, growing up in a one-stoplight town in Kentucky. But my wife and I saw it as a great opportunity to grow our family. And so we had no idea what we were getting into. But within a week, we applied to adopt from Ethiopia. And 2 years later, again, we were ignorant to the process, and I'm so thankful, or else we may not have done it. But 2 years later, our first son, Samuel, comes home from Ethiopia. And 10 months later, another son through adoption. A few years later, our first daughter. A few years after that, another daughter. And believe it or not, we just brought home baby number 5 about 2 weeks ago. And that was actually completely unexpected, by the way. They called us on Saturday, and we had to make a decision by Monday. It was very fast. So, but baby is here and doing well, and it's been a big adjustment, obviously, for our family. But the Lord has really blessed it. And but through those adoption processes, the Lord just pushed us to want to help other families that are trying to adopt. And so we started the Omnah Foundation, OMNAH, and that's Hebrew. It's from Esther 2:20, and it means to nurture as a child. And it's where it says she was brought up by him, talking about Esther and Mordecai. But we've partnered with about 50 families now, 40 that have brought children home. And that really became the mission behind LifeBridge Capital, was to be able to help these families. And so it's been a growing process, to say the least, but it's been amazing to see how the Lord has used that, because every employee that we've hired in the interview process, before I even bring up our mission, they say they love our mission and want to work for us because of that, right? And investors that want to partner with us, they love our mission. They love being a part of something bigger, than just us trying to buy a bigger house or car or whatever those things may be. And so that's been something the Lord placed. And it allowed me to make connections really quickly, and I didn't plan it that way, but he definitely had a plan.
That's incredible. First, thank you so much for your service, both in the uniform and with the badge. And uh, obviously, you're not averse to risk uh, for being a defender and protector, but also jumping into but the horse farm, which you had experience with, but that's going from law enforcement into that is it's kind of a switch, but then also
It is kind of a
deciding
switch.
to abandon all of that for something you didn't have a whole lot of experience in. You had have the with the triplex and the smaller units, but yeah, some people they start off small and they just get a little bit bigger. You went all the way in, and not only that, but you started a podcast, and not just a podcast, but a daily. That frankly takes balls. Uh, how did you? How were you able to accomplish this in a short amount of time?
Yeah. So, when we started the podcast, I don't think that I'd hardly ever spoken into a microphone before. And so really it didn't make any sense. And so I, I was traveling, I was meeting different people at conferences, and there were a couple people specifically who were very widely respected in our industry that I was talking to about the podcast and starting a daily podcast. Both of these individuals told me, Whitney, that's crazy. Don't do a daily podcast. And so I had a mentor, and now he's a great friend. But I went to him and I said, "Hey, these two people said that I was crazy if I did this." And he said, "This was his response. This fast." He said, "Well, that's why you have to do it, because it's too much work for most people." Like, okay. That I needed that kind of kick in the tail right at that moment, because it was a pivotal moment of me deciding, hey, is this crazy? Because everybody I talk to about podcasting, which most people do, if you're going to start a podcast, well, you talk to people who've done a podcast, right? And everybody said, oh, Whitney, it's so much work, or I can't get the show notes done, I can't find the guests, and all these things. And the thing they all had in common was they were all doing weekly shows. And I thought, man, maybe this is crazy, but you know what? It made me think differently, Aaron. It made me do things differently, because if I had done a weekly show from the beginning, I would have tried to have done those things. I would have tried to have done the show notes and the editing and the posting and the finding the guests, and thought, okay, I'll get it done. And I think that I would have gotten behind and probably quit on the podcasting. However, doing 7 times that many, I knew those things weren't even an option. I was still working full time as a federal agent as well. And so I had to build a team of virtual assistants from all over the world. I had 4 or 5 team members that were all VAs that did different parts of the show. And they knew that I was off work every other Monday from the federal position. And on those Mondays, they had to have 12 to 15 interviews scheduled for me back to back to back. And my wife would call it my marathon day. She would literally pack me lunch to go to the basement, which I hardly would get to eat, because they were literally back to back all day. But I just knew that's what I had to do to keep up. And I could barely keep up then. And so I didn't do any other parts of the show because I had to build a team to do that. And it really cost everything we had to do it. And then some. It's so expensive, to do a podcast anyway, much less a daily show. But you know what? Those times when I look back are sweet as well. When I think about those harder times, because I was traveling to conferences on the weekend, doing the podcast, still working full time. We were going through another adoption process. We had a failed placement, meaning we lost a lot of money and time through the adoption process. It was, we just sold our farm, but however, what, the Lord would just unite my wife and I every morning. We were up early, and we would have coffee and just pray together and talk about the week or the kids or read, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And it was just a sweet time for us as well, even though it was very difficult. We look back on that time now and we're very grateful for that. But it was a big risk, like you said. Everybody thought we were crazy. We probably had the nicest house of anybody in our family, and not probably one of the better jobs as well. And so it was very hard for everyone to understand, man, why are you all doing this? Even our church family, who really love us, were like, Whitney, is there something wrong? Like, why would you all do this? But we knew, hey, there's while it seems like a big risk, it's a bigger risk to not try, right? I can go back and become a police officer again. I can go back and probably get hired by the federal government again if I had to. But I'll never know if we could have made it or not doing this if I don't try, right? And yeah, I mean, I would have never known. And so, and now all these families that we've been able to partner with through the Omnah Foundation, that wouldn't have happened. And who knows, what else? But all the connections to real estate and people we've been able to help, that wouldn't have happened. And so I'm very thankful we took the risk. And some would have said it was careless or crazy, right? A lot of people did, but I'm so thankful that we did, when we did.
Well, it takes quite a bit of intention, right? You got to have that plan, a vision for the future, because I know, uh, what you said, doing a daily, not only expensive, but a lot of people thought we're crazy. And I know, being a blind deaf man who started a podcast himself and invests in real estate. In fact, my first investment was out of state, bought an online auction, a burr
Wow.
with hard money. Talk about the most difficult thing a blind deaf guy could possibly do. And,
That's incredible. Yeah,
well, it turned out just like you might imagine it would. But it got me started.
that's
And
right.
the first person and starting a e-commerce fudge business. And uh, I've been told I'm crazy actually on a regular basis now, especially by my wife. So how did how did you get your wife on board with this? And um, I mean, was she excited about real estate? Was she excited about podcasting?
I love that question. And because I don't hear that question often or a focus there. And I try to ask people similar questions around when they make big decisions like that, because I think it's so crucial, right? Because me as a man, if I didn't have the support of my bride, it wouldn't work, and during this time, it would not have worked. If she hadn't been behind me, it would not have happened. But when I first talked to her about going into commercial real estate, Aaron, I'll never forget, and she talks about this often as well. I was going to sign up for a coaching program or to have a mentor in this space, and at the time, it cost $12,000, and we didn't have $12,000, and we were about to start another adoption process, which we knew was going to be another $50,000 to $75,000, unfortunately. And so when I told her that, hey, I really think that we should go all in on commercial real estate, and I want to hire a mentor for $12,000, she broke down and started crying. So, I mean, it was like, like there just wasn't. She didn't see a way for us to be able to afford it, and she also didn't see a way for us to be able to to afford to adopt again, right? To bring another child home. And so that's where her passion was right at that moment, and is to be able to bring another child home. And so that was difficult, right? However, the more we talked about it, you know what? It just increased our faith in the Lord, and He has provided time and time again. But if not for our relationship with the Lord and our unity together, it wouldn't have worked. I'm confident over the next 2 years, because it was very difficult. I mean, I'll never forget she and I pulling out of the farm for the last time and us just bawling and crying and thinking, Lord, is this good? Is this right? Because it wasn't fun, that's for sure, right? It wasn't what everybody thought we should be doing, and we didn't almost want to be doing it at the moment, but we were both unified in the mission to be able to help more families to adopt. And so that mission that was already there. And so we knew at that time, hey, my wife couldn't care less about real estate, Aaron. She couldn't care less about podcasting, but she supports me completely in those things, because she knows, like, she's passionate about our bigger mission of being able to help more families adopt. And that's what's driven all of this, from the very beginning, even when we had to make that decision, hey, when we didn't have the 12,000 or even the next 50 to put towards another adoption at the time.
She believed in you, and she believed in the mission,
That's right.
and that was enough to carry through the uncertain times.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll tell you what, my wife didn't care in the slightest about fudge. Uh, and in fact, I'm pretty sure she hates fudge. And she wasn't interested at all in real estate. But I guess I'm convincing. But
Yeah.
uh, it's worked out well for both of us. In fact, now no, she's a real estate agent, and
Oh, wow. That's
and
fun.
oh yeah, she's incredible. She's really taken to it, from real estate agent to local mastermind to co-hosting and short-term, hosting our own short-term rentals. It's amazing. But
That's so cool.
oh, tell me about LifeBridge and the birth of this. How you were able to raise the kind of money you were, and tell me a little bit more. Let's go a little deeper on that.
Yeah. So just to give a little background there, I had no background or no network, of wealthy families, or I didn't have a wealthy family. I didn't come from money whatsoever. And my network at that time was not a wealthy network. I didn't know anybody in the real estate business or investing. Most of my friends had probably not even thought about doing any kind of investing, or even thinking that way at that time. So when we moved and we started the podcast, Aaron, I started going to as many conferences as I possibly could. And I was shaking every hand, talking to everybody I could possibly talk to. And what started to happen though is, and again, I didn't plan it this way, but I would meet somebody at a conference, and everybody says, well, what do you do? Right? Or, who are you? What do you do? And I would talk about, we have a foundation that helps families adopt children. It costs $50,000 to $75,000, unfortunately, to bring a child home through adoption, which keeps most families from pursuing adoption. So we have a foundation that provides grants for those families, but we fund that through a commercial real estate business where we buy multifamily real estate. And so our investors love knowing that they get to play a role in this, even though and it doesn't affect their returns. And then I just stopped talking. Right. And then that person, obviously they have questions then. Wait a minute, adoption, you're helping families adopt. And,
Mm-hmm.
and so it takes the conversation, Aaron, of a totally different direction than the last 20 people they've talked to about commercial real estate. Right. Or the market that person's investing in, or the specific deal. And again, I didn't plan it that way, but I started seeing how that was working. And so, but then what happens is they're telling me then about their kids or grandkids or something they're passionate about. Right. And so it builds a very different relationship than if I would have just said, oh yeah, we've got this deal in Idaho or whatever, and started talking about the Boise market or started talking about multifamily or right. And we can talk about those things, but I want to focus on building the relationship initially. Right. And I want you to know who I am at a deeper level than just business. Right. And so that started to happen. And then, but what I also found is that when I would follow up with those people, they would remember who I was, right? Because of that mission and because of that thing that's big or that's different, right, than everybody else they talked to at that conference. And I'll tell you something I used to do as well when I would meet so many people at a conference. Of course, I'm taking their business cards or exchanging cards, and I would then go to the bathroom and I would write down as much as I could remember on all those cards, or even send myself a voice memo, of
Mm-hmm.
all the details I could remember about these people. So when I followed up, I could reference those things, right, as well. And so anyway, that was just a little technical thing that I used to do, but the mission piece is really still what set me apart, helped me to build relationships, and it helped us to be able to raise money, in the future that I never imagined. It was still probably, it was, a good while, 18 months or so before we did our first big deal after, say, starting the podcast or so. And my business partner and I raised about $7 million. And I just never, I never would have imagined. When I think back about that, I think we were crazy. I don't know what we were thinking. Somehow we did find the funds, but $7 million, and then, the next deal we raised even more. And so it started to grow, but it was the same time the podcast was going and growing, and more people were learning about us and hearing about our mission, and, and gaining traction. And so it was the travel, it was the meeting people, it was the following up, it was the podcast, and many things at the same time.
After these messages, we'll be right back. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this episode, Extraordinary Delights, EODFudge.com. Extraordinary Delights is a disabled veteran, family-owned small business making handcrafted fudge and other sweet treats for the chocolate-loving patriots just like you. Go to eodfudge.com and check out some of our delicious flavors like triple threat chocolate with or without walnuts, mint dark chocolate, strawberry and creamy white chocolate, or my personal favorite, American Pick-Me-Up, an all-American version of tiramisu. While you're there, go to the apparel store and check out our awesome t-shirts, polos, and the baddest tactical apron on the market. You see me wear on the TikTok show, Aaron Hale's Cook Without Looking. So, right now, go over to eodfudge.com and pick out some fudge, other sweet treats for that patriot in your life with a sweet tooth. That's eodfudge.com. eodfudge.com. And now, back to the show. So many things about what you just said there. On the surface level, the more, I guess, shallow end of that is that when talking about giving away, talking about adoption, and you make that connection, and you stand out. You're more unique than the other syndicators, the other fundraisers in the conference. But then on that deeper level, you are connecting on a more personal level with everybody there, the people you speak with. But there's also this recurring theme that so many people that I've talked to on this show is that they find the biggest success only started happening. Their momentum, that inertia, really took off when they started giving it away. Like the more they gave of themselves, the more they got in return. Maybe it's that go-giver philosophy of not expecting an immediate return, not an immediate ROI, but adding value. And maybe part of that is the adoption where everybody wants to be a part of something great. And
Right.
you brought them something special to be a part of. And so that endeared you even on a much greater level. I don't know if it was you or I know there was a metaphor that I remember that's always stuck with me about abundance. And people, you feel the need to fill up their cup before they can fill others.
Mm,
And instead, it should be that abundance flows through you. So you cut the bottom of that cup off. And it's like a current. It just flows through you to others. And I think that's incredible.
yeah,
So
love that.
uh, we're your very first capital raise was $7 million. That's pretty profound. What were the kind of emotions you went through? Was that must have been, I don't know, for me, I think that would have been terrifying. But you said it. You were already capital raising before you found the deal. What's the process there for capital raising, for developing these relationships? You said you're writing down information on backs of business cards. What are you doing today to develop those relationships?
Yeah, appreciate the question, and that intentionality went a long ways, right? When I can follow up and say, hey John, it was great to meet you at the conference, last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. How's little Johnny's soccer game, or how did it go, right? Like, and that kind of intentionality goes a long way, and that's going to get a response typically, right? They see that you were that intentional, they're going to respond often, and then it's, hey, I'd love to connect again, right? Or here's a link, or how, say specifically, how's next Tuesday at noon? I'd love to follow up and just get to know you a little better, right? Or following up is crucial. And I find that people spend so much time going to conferences or whatever it may be, virtual or in person, and then they don't follow up. It's like, well, what did you even go for, right? You went, whether you know it or not, you went to meet people, you went to network, and so much value is in shaking the hands in the room, right? I mean, that is where so much of the value is. But you need to follow up, and these people need to connect with you, right? And we all know that now. And at that time, it was shaking hands, taking notes, following up. While, now obviously I have numerous people on the team, and I may have people say, now it's a little more complicated, but it's virtually the same. If I'm at a conference or at an event and I get an attendee list, or even an app, right, with a bunch of names in it, well, somebody on the team can go through and connect with those people on LinkedIn or connect with them on Facebook or whatever. They can be doing those things, right? Or even reaching out at the same time and saying, hey, Aaron, it was great to see you at the conference, right? How can I, help add value to you this week? Or, hey, maybe that person would be a great guest for the podcast, right? It's where the podcast comes in too, where I can get to know that person better by inviting them on the show, right? And starting to build that relationship. But now too, it's continuing to follow up and having a sequence of emails that follows up, and getting creative with your CRM and scheduling calls. Most of our investors, I'm trying to reach out to them. We put them in classes. And so depending on how many deals they've been in, how much they've invested, and our top investors I'm talking to, or at least reaching out to try to talk to them numerous times a year. Right. Where, the brand new investors, maybe it's, once a year or something like that. Or at least somebody from the team is reaching out to them to say, hey, how are you doing? Are the updates, are you getting the updates? Are they telling you what you need to know? Or what else would you like to see? Or, right. And just learning from them. Hey, are you looking to invest again in the near future? And just learning, hey, how's it going? But I'll tell you one thing that's really helped me too, Aaron. When I talk to an investor on the phone, one question I always love to ask is, what do you like to do for fun? And it really catches most of them off guard, right? Because they're just expecting us to talk again about multifamily or the real estate market or whatever the next deal is. And it allows me to get to know them, because that's when they're going to tell me about their kids or tell me about the hobbies that they have. And then again, that gives me another reason to reach back out to them and say, hey, how was that soccer game? Or, hey, how was that golf game? Or whatever it was that they mentioned. It allows me another personalized reason to reach back out to them, but ultimately just get to know them on a more personal level. And then, after you get rolling, I mean, it's performance, right? It's going to speak volumes to getting referrals. And, we ask for referrals but it takes some time, right, before that starts happening, to say the least. So yeah, that's a few things. Happy to go into anything you want.
Well, I'm sure that networking itself is a skill that needs to be practiced. I imagine without those personal questions, the conversation would be fairly robotic.
Right.
And in fact, without that personal touch, you must lose the passion for having the conversations. It would be work. But again, I think in having all these connections, all these conversations, there's a surface level, and then there's a deeper one. Well, for one, you're fulfilling an SEC requirement by having this pre-existing relationship. But on a deeper level, you're getting to know your investors. You're getting to know your partners, and of course, they're getting to know you. So I think that's important. And one of the things for new capital raisers is that it's like this huge mountain to climb, but they're just looking at the top. That figure. But I think you mentioned before, like right now, you're raising capital. Might not have a deal in the pipeline yet, but you're raising capital right now. So how about finding partners, finding the deals, the rest of the enchilada?
Yeah. I would say partners are found in similar ways, as investors, right? It's going to conferences, it's meeting people, it's having people on your podcast and developing those relationships, no doubt about it. But as far as the deals, most of our projects have all been through broker relationships or relationships we've developed with some specific developers in the markets that we're in, and that's we've not really gone after, say, your off market type deals. We bought some, because of previous relationships or because of properties we bought from other sellers, where there might be a deal or two we bought off market because of that relationship. But for the most part, it's been working those broker relationships, for a number of years now, and them seeing that you can perform, seeing you can raise the money, seeing that you're serious, and just being polite, being respectful, and doing what you say you're going to do. It really does matter, no doubt about it. But then the developer relationships as well. There's a couple of different markets we've bought brand new deals in, but it's because that we knew those developers or had connected with them and nurtured those relationships. And then we bought one deal from them. And then we bought a second deal from them. We've done that with two different developers now. We bought more than one deal from them that they built. But, because we took the time to meet them and build the relationship for that first one.
What about, you mentioned you have a CRM now. What are you using to manage all these names and relationships?
We use HubSpot. We've used HubSpot for a long time. We switched to Salesforce at one point, which was a major mistake. I'll just want to put that out there to save anybody the headache. Major mistake. And then we actually switched back to HubSpot. And I actually, at the moment, just in case anybody's looking for a CRM, I think one of the best options out there right now is a product called Go High Level. I'm using it in a different business a little bit and some other team members. And I think that for the money, it's very robust and a lot cheaper than HubSpot, just so you know. But, once you get so ingrained in one, it's really hard to change as well. But even in that regard, it's like we set up different sequences of emails as well. And so, when I talk to an investor, I go in, I mark them as an investor, I document the phone conversation, I follow up with an email, a personalized email, right? So that way they know how to get a hold of me at any time. They can schedule a call at any time. They got my phone number, all those things. But I also enroll them in a sequence of emails, right? And so then I know, hey, over the next few months, they're going to learn about who LifeBridge is. They're going to learn about who Whitney Sewell is, the team is, what our mission is, and more about Omnah. And they're going to get to know those things, guess what, without me even lifting a finger at that point. Right. And that's where the CRM really helps us to start to scale, because I can't remember to follow up with all those people, but I can, hit a button right then to put them in a certain sequence. So they start to learn those things. And then they can even respond to those emails and ask questions if they want. But either way, we get to stay in front of them, for a pretty good period of time.
Right. All right. I need reminders for everything. And if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist. And for me, we use High Level for the podcast, and unfortunately, it's terribly inaccessible. So we have to find something else. But it doesn't matter when you're a blind person. No matter how good you get at anything on the computer, somebody with eyes can do it 10 times faster. So it's what my team can do the best, but I still need to have access at some level. But anything, even a spreadsheet, it's like playing Minesweeper. That LifeBridge, though, with these acquisitions, with this revenue, you have a pretty strong dedication to donating this to supporting adoption. How much of the profits go to the nonprofit?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So my wife and I committed half of our personal profits for a good while. And then what we've done more recently, actually towards the middle of next year, we're actually transitioning to up to half of the operating profits from LifeBridge as well. And so it's yeah, it's been a growing thing for our whole team. Cause like I said, at first it was just my wife and I, and then, but in the very near future, it'll include, half of our operating profits from LifeBridge as well. But yes, it's been a big commitment, but it's almost like you mentioned earlier. If you know I don't know every detail of it, but the story of like John D. Rockefeller, I think he was like on his deathbed, and then he commits like half of his earnings to giving it away. And, obviously he gets better. And then he's, because of what he's given away, he's more wealthy than he even was before. It's like, there's so much joy in giving. And when I think about these families and these children that are affected for eternity, for just, generations to come, but even eternity, it's so worth it. Right. It is so worth it. I heard a quote the other day. You can only, You can only, keep, or you can only take with you what you give away. I think that's what it was. Yeah. You can only take with you, what you give away. And so I just try to remember that, because it's so important.
I think it was Rockefeller who used to own one of the U.S. Virgin Islands, and now it's almost entirely national park, St. John. I think as the story goes, his fortune was growing so fast, he had trouble giving it away faster than it was growing, or spending it, however. But it is, again, it's incredible how much value we receive by giving the value. And that's, of course, the intention of this podcast. So what is on the horizon? What are you most excited about now?
While LifeBridge is continuing to grow, and I'm trying to commit some more time towards one, obviously, the Omnah Foundation and helping grow that. But I'm also, I've started a personal website, whitneysewell.com, but where I'm wanting to be able to coach men or really help men to lead well in their homes. And all the conferences I've been to, Aaron, I talk to people and people I've interviewed, I just don't hear people focusing on really what they claim is most important, right? Everybody says that, hey, we're doing this for our families, we're working so hard, but unfortunately, oftentimes they're sacrificing those relationships that they claim are most important. And so I encourage men to, hey, I want you to be as famous at the dining room table as you are at the boardroom table, right? And I want to have the same intentionality, and even more so with those people in my home, right? My wife, my children, as I do in the office, right? I do what's called alignment meetings with our team members on a monthly basis, and allows me to ask them, hey, how they're doing, how's this going, to really talk about things that aren't just the day-to-day grind of things that they're working on, right? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, if I do that with them, shouldn't I be that intentional with my children, or my wife, right? And so, or even, we have mission statements, in business, and we're so intentional what that says and all those words, but we don't typically have a mission statement for our family, right? And so I've created even a free little course that people can go through, or that men can go through, to lead their families into creating a family mission statement. And what I love about it is that no matter how old your kids are, let's say they're 5 years or older, either, they can typically be a part of the conversation. They can provide some words that are important to them towards this mission statement. And then towards the end of those days, that you craft a mission statement that includes these words that came even from your 5-year-old. And then you have a little ceremony as a family, where you're like putting this mission statement on the wall. And what I love about it is that it doesn't need to be this like amazingly worded sounding thing, right? It needs to be something that everybody contributed to. And that helps even that 5-year-old to see that they had a role in crafting that mission statement, right? Mm-hmm. And then what happens, just like in business, well, when there's a decision to be made in the family, Well, it gives everybody something to look towards, right? Well, does this meet our mission? Does it not? Even if there's an argument between kids, right? So that's something I'm excited about right now, is just helping other men in that way, and pushing guys to, hey, really lead well in their homes. And I was actually just talking to a friend a few days ago, and he was really being very transparent, just sharing, hey, I don't feel like I lead well in my home. I don't feel like, like I can do it, or I'm so passive, or, and he feels like I've got something that he doesn't. And I just try to stress, hey, I don't. These are learned skills. You can learn it. You can do it. The Lord's placed you in your family to lead them because you can do it. It's not you are adequate enough. You can learn these skills, and I want to help other guys to do that. So anyway, that's something I'm very excited about. Even that, helps people to see who I am, see more about our family, and just even build more relationships. Right? It's going to help us. It's not the direct thing we're doing it for, but I know it's going to help us to raise more money. Right? I know it's going to help Omnah as well. It's going to allow me to connect with people who are passionate about leading their families well, and so that's something I'm excited about at the moment.
Yeah, and building those relationships, that just makes life richer. It makes it more fun. And how old are the kids now?
They are 11, 10, 5, 14 months, and 3 weeks. So little.
And it's not enough to keep them fed and clothed and cross your fingers that they don't turn into little assholes, or
That's
big
right.
assholes. Also, you have to be intentional. You reminded me of a great book I read, Family Board Meeting.
Oh, yes.
And I mean, because
Yes.
it sounded just like it, but really good read, really great idea for developing relationships with each individual kid on a one-on-one basis. So I thought that was great.
I've had Jim on the show a few times. We did a series of Jim Shields, he's the author of that book, and I actually gave it away to anybody that wanted it, that was listening, because I just, that one-on-one time is so important. And the more I got to know Jim, and the more we started doing those one-on-ones with our kids, like I just see that how important it is, because your children are different when it's one-on-one versus having one other person there with you, and just as it is with any relationship, right? It's different when there's a third person. So there's different conversations that are had, different relationship that's built, and so I agree. It's so important, and I love that book. It's really short read, by the way. If anybody's listening, man, you have children, you should definitely read that book.
I think after reading that book, the very first one I did with my oldest was even before we had the twins, because we're right on the Gulf of Mexico. We took hired a helicopter, took a helicopter ride out over the Gulf, and I think I might have ruined him for swimming in open water, because he was like, I had no idea there was that many sharks that close to land.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
But he got his bravery back. But that
And what
was
about that experience together, though? Right? I mean, that's incredible.
yeah. But we get to talk, we get to say that, like, remember what we saw,
Right.
or what he saw. But yeah, he mentions it all the time, and our other board meetings. But it's a great time to transition to the final segment of the show, called the countdown to impact. And before we get into that, I want to ask you what your definition of living a life of impact means.
Mm. My definition of living a life of impact. I do believe it even goes back to generosity, but I have to even say, like, I want to steward what the Lord has entrusted to me well. And it's not just finances. It's your time as well, right? Like, how are you spending your time? Who are you pouring into? You've been entrusted with skills and abilities that are not just for you, right? And how are you using that to bless and to help other people and to bring them along? And so, to be able to make an impact, I feel like, is why we're here. It's why we should be in business, and is to be able to help others and to give it away. And so that should be at your forefront when you're starting almost anything. I feel like
That's a good answer. You're a go at this station. Uh, Now, on to countdown for countdown to impact. It's 3, 2, 1. 3 books, 2 quotes, and one person who have all made an impact in your life.
3 books. Obviously, I would say the Bible first and foremost. Another one that has impacted me early on was even The Miracle Morning by Hale Elrod, and I don't follow all of those things that he lists in there, but at the moment when I read that book, it did make me think about how I'm spending my time in the morning and being more intentional. And so I started to lay out my morning by every like 15 to 20 minutes. And that changed so much for me, that consistency in the mornings and educating myself. And that changed things. But it was really that book that made me think about how I'm using that time. There's so many. I mean, you can see behind. There's so many books. One book also is 10x is easier than 2x. Dan Sullivan, Benjamin Hardy. Like, it makes you think differently about scaling. It's similar to the podcast that we were talking when we were talking about starting the podcast. Like, I had to think differently doing 7x versus 1. Because otherwise I would have tried to have done everything. Well, no, doing 7, I knew I couldn't do everything. So I had to just immediately start thinking about who am I going to hire, right? And I'd think about the hiring process versus how I'm going to do show notes, right? It's that type of thinking that, I try to apply to lots of different aspects. There's a number of quotes, even the one I mentioned earlier, about, you can only take with you, what you give away. I try to remember that, and I want to instill that in my children as well. There's a number of quotes, and one person that I would say has my children have been learning about, and it's been helpful for me too, is Winston Churchill. There's so many quotes that he has, but I loved his focus on family. I loved his focus on leadership and a number of areas. But anyway, you said one person, though. He wouldn't be the one. I mean, Jesus Christ would be that one person. If I had to pick somebody that's alive today, my goodness, I was trying to think, but there's a guy named Lloyd Reeves, and he's been a mentor of mine for a while now. He leads a group called Halftime Institute, and a thing called 100X, and it's he has inspired me in ways that are very impactful, I'll say, Aaron, more so than financially. He's very successful in business early on. And, he and his wife limited their spending to like $100,000 a year, while he's worth so much more than that. But then he left the business world and started leading this group called Halftime. If you've ever read Halftime by Bob Buford, Lloyd was mentored by Bob Buford. But Lloyd has helped, thousands and thousands of men all over the world, and women now, to think about how to have more impact over the second half of your life. And it has nothing to do with your age, but it's really like laying out on what he calls a 100X roadmap, the areas of impact. It's like 5 areas, and you lay it out and really being thoughtful, you and your spouse, about, hey, these are the skills that I've been given, over the first half of my life or in business or whatever. How can I use those things, for the biggest impact moving forward? And it's been really good for me. He's been such a great mentor. And so that's the person. He's one of those kind of guys that if you were standing next to him, you would never know. He's the most humble guy, but probably the most well-connected person in the world that I know. So anyway, he is somebody that I just look up to in a big way.
That's great. In fact, I could break down just about every one of those, the books, the quotes, and person into an episode all on its own. I'm a huge fan of Winston Churchill. Hal Elrod helped me get through some of my most difficult times with my morning lifesaver routine. Yeah, and the 10x is easier than 2x. It goes back to when I first started in real estate. When I think it was David Green's book about investing in out of state or long distance real estate.
Oh yeah,
and I had to create a team But for me, it was 10 minutes down the road or 10 states away. I was still going to have to build a team to do what I wanted to do. And it works for the podcast. It works for the real estate. It works in so many aspects of my life. And again, those connections, those relationships make my life richer anyways than trying to do it all on my own. So,
Right. That's right.
uh, thank you. Those were incredible. Thank you. And we'll put that in the show notes. So, final question is, uh, where can people learn more?
WhitneySewell.com is the best place. You can learn about the real estate business and foundation and lots of things there.
Well, Whitney, once more, thank you for your service. Thank you for your time and your knowledge. I really appreciate you coming on to the show.
Aaron, thank you. I appreciate you as well. Very grateful.